Do you know how to move on and stop giving a fuck? I have already made a video about how to stop giving a fuck, so today we will talk about how to move on. Let me start with the first thing to do, and that is to look at your life as a journey. It's important to keep in mind that everyone who's doing okay now has had moments when they thought they'd never be okay. A breakup may feel like the end of the world, but years from now, a struggle of today will feel like a lesson from the past. The more we can look at our lives as fluid and not fixed, the more we can see our experiences in perspective. The end of a relationship is not the end of our story. Whether we're with someone or on our own, no one else can possess our story or our identity. We may leave a relationship feeling like we left part of ourselves behind, wondering how to move on without the other person, but the truth is we are still whole, still evolving, and still growing all the time. Keeping the imagery of movement in our minds is a way of preventing ourselves from being caught in the whirlpool of an inner critic that tells us we will never be able to move on or feel like ourselves again. Silence your inner critic. The critical inner voice is a term used by Dr. Robert Firestone to describe a negative thought process we all have that is like an internalized nemesis. This cruel voice criticizes, coaches, and even pities us and others in ways that undermine us when we're up and kick us when we're down. A lot of the pain and suffering we experience after a breakup is owed to this inner critic. Getting caught up in this internal dialogue makes the process of figuring out how to move on much more difficult. Reflect realistically. There is always real loss that comes with breaking up. However, we also tend to look back on our relationships with a zoom lens on the good and blinders on the bad. Reflect on the relationship for what it was, advised Dr. Karen Weinstein in an interview with Business Insider. Resist the common tendency to idealize the relationship. It's very common to only recall and focus on the wonderful aspects of the relationship. This makes it even harder to accept the reality that it's over and is the equivalent of denial in the stages of grief. Remembering that there were struggles and issues in the relationship and real reasons why we are no longer together can help us feel more resilient and resolved toward moving on. Let go of fantasy. Idealizing our partner or a relationship isn't just something that happens after we split up. Often, couples enter into what Dr. Firestone calls a fantasy bond, an illusion of connection that replaces real relating and genuine acts of love and intimacy. Symptoms of a fantasy bond can include relating as a unit, valuing the form of being a couple over the substance of making contact, falling into routine, lacking independence, engaging in less affection, and entering into dynamics of control and submission as opposed to equality. The quality of the relationship often deteriorates as real love is replaced with a fantasy bond. The couple may stay together based on a fantasy that their partner will somehow save them. Or, they may split up because the elements that first drew them together are no longer operating. Breaking the fantasy bond with a former partner is often key to moving on. Feel the feelings. It's normal to be emotionally raw after a breakup. Although these feelings can feel overwhelming, we should remember that emotion comes in waves. It arrives, peaks, and subsides. Accepting our feelings is part of the path to healing. Treat yourself the way you would a friend, and give yourself a break. We can acknowledge the sadness, anger, or fear that arises without handing these feelings over to our inner critic. Remember that our feelings are acceptable, but the thoughts around the feelings, like you'll never find anyone else or you can't live without him or her, are not. Believe in yourself. Stanford researchers recently discovered that a person's basic beliefs about personality can contribute to whether they recover from or remain mired in the pain of rejection. They found that individuals who saw personality as fixed were more likely to blame themselves and their toxic personalities for the breakup. They were more likely to question and criticize themselves and feel more hopeless about their romantic future. However, individuals who saw their personalities as changeable were more inclined to view their breakup as an opportunity to grow, develop, and change. They were hopeful about their future relationships and were able to move on more easily. If we can stand up to our inner critic and believe in our own adaptability, we can actually figure out how to move on more successfully. Believe in yourself. Stanford researchers recently discovered that a person's basic beliefs about personality can contribute to whether they recover from or remain mired in the pain of rejection. They found that individuals who saw personality as fixed were more likely to blame themselves and their toxic personalities for the breakup. They were more likely to question and criticize themselves and feel more hopeless about their romantic future. However, individuals who saw their personalities as changeable were more inclined to view their breakup as an opportunity to grow, develop, and change. They were hopeful about their future relationships and were able to move on more easily. If we can stand up to our inner critic and believe in our own adaptability, we can actually figure out how to move on more successfully. Embrace self-compassion. Self-compassion can be a key ingredient to healing from a breakup. If you pick all of the variables that predict how people will do after their marriage ends, self-compassion really carries the day, said researcher David Sabara of University of Arizona after interviewing more than 100 recently divorced individuals. According to Greater Good magazine, Sabara's research showed that those with high self-compassion reported fewer intrusive negative thoughts, fewer bad dreams about the divorce, and less negative rumination. Self-compassion had a greater impact than other traits, habits, or even practical details. Just remember, she or he is the past, today is a gift, and tomorrow is a mystery. So use it to become better, self-improve, and focus on yourself, because in the end, that's the best thing you can do. Do not solve it by drinking or doing drugs, because that will not help you in the long term. Do the hard work and collect the reward after a while. Stay strong, kings. See you next time.